Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Selby here at Heart of Steamboat. Thank you for joining me. Last week when we were at church on Sunday, I invited people to write down things that we want Jesus to save us from. And this week, I took all those pieces of paper and I went through and I read every single one and thought about what those responses were. And do you know what the number one responses were on that piece of paper? They were worry, fear, and anxiety, which are really kind of the same thing in a way, right? Worry, anxiety, fear. So if you take those three things that were the most common responses, you put them all together and you get one gigantic, clear response that we want Jesus to save us from our worries and our fears and our anxieties. Well, we're in a little series here in Let right now where we're talking about questions that Jesus asked. And one of the questions Jesus asked has to do with fear. It happened one night when he was with his disciples on a boat in the dark in a storm. And the disciples were afraid because they were in a boat on a lake in the dark in a storm, right? And but Jesus asked them this question. He says, "Why are you afraid? Why are you afraid?" And then he asked him another question, "Don't you have faith?" Now, I got to tell you, this week, me and Jesus, we had a little thing. We were like in an argument. We had a problem going on this week based on this question. This question that Jesus asked his disciples, "Why are you afraid?" Well, I would imagine they might say, "We're afraid because we're in a storm in a boat in the dark." Of course we're afraid. Jesus, come on. And I wonder also, how might we answer that question? Why are we afraid? Well, we're afraid for lots of reasons. We're afraid because kids get shot when they go to school. We're afraid because there's war in the Holy Land that seems endless and draws so many people in. We're afraid because we seem to have politicians that are more interested in stoking fear and anger and divisiveness than they are in bringing people together. We're afraid because you know what? That spot on the x ray, the doctors can't quite figure out what it is. We're afraid because we don't know if we're going to be able to pay the rent on Friday and where will we go and what will we tell our kids and how will we survive. We're afraid because the oceans are getting clogged with trash and you can get killed just driving your car around. And we live in such an uncertain and dangerous world in so many ways. And Jesus says to us, "Why are you afraid?" Oh, man. So I'm like, whatever, Jesus. What kind of question is that? You're going to ask us this question? And then he makes it worse by saying, "Don't you have faith?" You kidding? I can imagine the disciples wanting to respond to this question, like, Jesus, why don't we have faith? What, Jesus, let me tell you, we left our whole lives to follow you. We left our families, we left our homes, we left everything we had ever known. We left our future. We left all of it to follow you because we believe in you, in what you teach, in how you live, in what you stand for. We love the way that you believe in us and see the best in us, and we've given it all up to follow you. And you're going to ask us, why don't we have faith? And then I thought about how we might answer that same question. Why don't we have faith? And it's tough having faith in the modern world, isn't it? I mean, it's challenging. Like we live in this world where we're trying to live out our faith. And if you're like me, there's parts of the Christian world that just seems so different than the way we experience and understand Jesus. Seems so divorced from that. Seems to be focused more on judgment and divisiveness and all the wrong things. And then on the other hand, there's whole segments of our culture and society that have just thrown faith out the window and think we're strange because we hang on to it. And so we try to find our way through this in the modern world and to follow Jesus as best we can and how in the way that we understand that and not be judgmental of other people of faith in our Christian world, and to not be dismissive of people who don't have any faith at all, but to just try to find our way to follow Jesus in the middle of all this. And it is hard. So Jesus, if you got this faith, why don't you give me some more of it? Why don't you show me where to find it? Because I've never wanted anything more in all my life than to have more faith. I've always wanted more faith. I wanted the faith to truly know that death is not the end. I want that faith to truly know that every tear does get wiped away. I want that faith to know that my loved ones who have passed on before me, that they're fine and they're in beauty and they're in love, and then I will be there too. I want the faith to know that in the end that love wins, and all the pain and the suffering and the struggle of our world will make sense somehow, some way. Yeah, give me that kind of faith, Jesus. Have you ever had an argument with someone you really love and care about? And and you're good, your relationship's solid, and there's no problem, but you just need to not talk to them for a while. You just need a moment. Well, that's kind of how I felt this week of wrestling with this with Jesus. And so I kind of took a break from that. You know what I did? I went and read the Old Testament. How about that, Jesus? You make me mad, I'll go read the Hebrew scriptures, and I'll go there. Haha, LOL. Um, but one of the verses that I read was Isaiah 41:10. It's a really powerful verse. There's a Bible app called YouVersion, which I guess has over 700 million downloads all around the world. So people all around the world are using this Bible app. I don't actually use it. I just read about it this week. But on this Bible app that has so many users all over the world, the number one searched verse for the last 3 years running was Isaiah 41:10, which has to do with fear as well. That verse says this. It says, "Do not fear, I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my mighty right hand." Hmm, a powerful verse. And one of the things I think is so powerful about this verse and why people are attracted to it is it's not just a verse about not being afraid. Like, don't be afraid. We have a lot of those verses. But it's also a verse that instills courage, because there's 5 things in there that God tells us that are really important in bringing us courage along the journey of our life. 5 things in one little verse. God says, "I will be with you." Number 2, God says, "I am your God." Number 3, God says, "I will strengthen you." Number 4, God says, "I will help you." And number 5, God says, "I will uphold you." I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you. See, these are words like you start to feel courage as this kind of gets poured into you. And from my view, I think it's really courage that we're looking for when we talk about fear. It's really courage that I seek and that I find in my relationship with God. It's courage that really matters. I'm 58 years old. I've read the scriptures my whole life. I'm still afraid of so many things. I've never found a way to get rid of my fears, but I have found ways to grow in courage, to grow in living in a way that's not just beholden to my fears. And the beautiful thing about courage is that we can grow in it. And part of the way we grow in it is by understanding that courage is a choice. It's not just something I'm born with. It's not a characteristic. It's not a feeling. It's not a quality. Courage is a choice. It's things we choose to do even while we are afraid. I'm going to walk into that school as a new kid on the first day. I'm going to apply for that job. I'm going to get back on that horse. I'm going to write that song. I'm going to pick up the phone and call that center that helps people who are victims of domestic violence. I'm going to tell my family who I really am. I'm going to start the chemotherapy. Or I've decided to stop the chemotherapy. I'm going to walk with Jesus to Jerusalem. You see, there's so many choices we make, so many things we do, even while we are afraid, but we choose to do them anyway. And that's the power of courage. Courage doesn't mean we're not afraid. Courage means we have something bigger in our lives than our fears. We choose something bigger, something beyond them. So when fears come your way, and they will, when fear comes your way, it will try to convince you that it's the biggest, baddest thing around and there ain't nothing else. But that's not true. When fears come your way, I always find a way to look past them, to look above them and below them, to look around them, because there's always something more. And we need to find the more, to listen to the more, to look for the more, to trust the more. Because our fears aren't the biggest thing out there. There is always more to be found. And it's courage that helps us to do that. The choice to live courageously in the world, even when we're afraid. So Jesus and me, over the course of the week, feel like we kind of worked it out. And we kind of worked it out mostly when I came to realize the kind of courage that Jesus lived with. You see, Jesus had the courage to love people extravagantly. He had the courage to challenge the powers that be. He had the courage to challenge the lifeless forms of faith that he might have seen around him. He had the courage to challenge the empire, to challenge forces in our world that would keep people down and separate people. He had the courage to love people and to hang on to something so big and so powerful. He wouldn't let go of it for anything, even if loving people that way made him end up on a cross. Yeah, Jesus had that kind of courage. And that's the kind of courage I want to have in my life. And I bet it's the kind of courage you want to have in your life as well. Jesus knew the fear. He was afraid. He knew the fear just like we do. We see that in the scriptures. But he held on to something bigger. And he lived for something bigger. And he lived with courage. So I guess I came to realize, that day on that lake, um, he wasn't being dismissive of the fears of those disciples. He just wanted to help teach them to live with that kind of courage and to not see their fears as the biggest thing in their life, to let that go and to strive for something more, just like he was doing in his own life. And I think that's what he wants to teach us to do too, to live with courage in a scary and uncertain world, to make choices based on courage, to make choices based on love, to make choices knowing that God will strengthen you and help you and uphold you all along the way. Now, I think maybe he could have worded it a little better, but or maybe the gospel writer missed some nuance in what was happening there, or maybe I just need to get over that little thing right there. But I think Jesus was really just teaching us to have courage. So whatever situation you're in life, may you have the courage to do what you need to do right now. May you have the courage to walk in those doors. May you have the courage to keep holding on to those hands. May you have the courage to go where you need to go. May you have the courage to keep getting up in the morning. May you have the courage to be on this journey of life that is sometimes so difficult. But may you be encouraged by the verse Isaiah 41:10, and may you find the courage to do what you got to do in the world right now. Blessings and grace to you. Thank you for joining me.